You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
So I wake to the news that Astro from UB40 has sadly died. Did you see
I just heard that too.
And sorry, I just started looking on Twitter, and there is an absolute classic example about how when bands fall out, they really fall out. That Astro was latterly performing with Ali Campbell, one of the Campbell brothers, as Ali Campbell and Astro, but their Twitter handle is UB40. Yeah, so there's a kind of, there's a message on that site, obviously saying that he died, after a very short illness. But if you then look on the elsewhere on Twitter, you find the rest of UB40 who say R.I.P. Astro. We just heard the sad news that ex-member of UB40, Terence Wilkinson, better known as Astro, has passed away after a short illness. Our sincere condolences to his family, which is fair enough, obviously. But they've ended up, all these years later, warring with two warring Twitter handles, one of which is UB40, and the other of which is UB40 official. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, there's a part of you that thinks, after all this time, can you not?
Surely that can be resolved.
Forget all about this stuff,
Also,
what I mean?
Ex-member of UB40. It's quite harsh, isn't it? Could be our old pal.
It's beyond. It's beyond the grave now. This enmity goes on. It is absolutely astonishing. As we've reflected time and time again, that if you have a hit record in your early 20s or whatever, you're married forever. You know what I mean?
You are.
And so it's like they're like a bitter divorced couple, made more acrimonious by the fact there's two brothers here at the center of this. Robin goes one way and Ali goes the other way.
It always seems inconceivable to me, that groups can't reform. You think not just the money's going to be absolutely colossal, but the idea that it would be so wonderful, surely, to go back and have that feeling that there's 10, 15,000 people more going mental hearing that music and the fun you get out of playing it. So the fact that you can't do that gives you some indication of just how huge the level of falling out has to be. It's breathtaking, isn't it?
It's probably so terrible. It's probable that nobody can remember what caused it. You know what I mean? It goes back so far.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a long story, isn't it? UB40 and just how popular they were, and how many records they sold in the late 70s and 80s. It's just absolutely astonishing.
Well, they were all over smash hits when we were there, weren't they? Early 80s, Red Wine and all that was just massive.
Yeah. Didn't you commission a feature in Q? Was it in Q? Because you wanted to see a picture of all of UB40.
Yes, I did. God, I've forgotten all about that.
And their dependents.
I did. And, I can still remember the number of people I think who were in the picture. Was it 52? Or was it 52 grandchildren? I can't remember.
That was so ridiculous.
They had the most staggering number of grandchildren, didn't they? And they also spent their money investing in all sorts of interesting things. I think they bought some land in Jamaica. Do you remember that? I think so, yeah. But there was the UB40 family was an enormous, sprawling concept.
And that's why they had to keep. That's why they had to keep working.
Absolutely,
they got a lot of food to put on a lot of tables.
A lot of tables, exactly.
And but anyway, it's very sad to see the death of Astro. And but why can't all groups just get along? In the end, there has to be a point at which they just put all their differences aside.
You'd think so. But again, as I say, it just gives you some idea of the measure of how much they must have fallen out that they don't.
Yeah. So then another sad news, and also news, there's this terrible case in Houston, Texas, which you've no doubt seen of.
The Astro World Festival.
Astro World Festival featuring Travis Scott. 8 people found dead. Announced already, and more people injured, and these are teenagers, early 20s or whatever. And
this was the rapper Travis Scott's concert, wasn't it? I think.
Yes, yeah, he's done this. He's done this more than once.
So is the story? I'm trying to work it out. The story is that if you go to a venue, it's the same with football venues. Obviously, there are VIP.
No, it's not. It's not. Anyway, go on.
No, I was going to say, but if you go to a football venue, you're not aware of the kind of VIP. But Loftus Road at QPR, you can just see there's a tier of kind of glass-fronted boxes, and you're kind of aware that there are people in there having apparently a slightly more well-heeled time than you are. But you're not reminded of it. Whereas at festivals, the new thing now is to build VIP stands, isn't it? Seating areas. Am I right? Which I think block the view.
Yeah, I don't know if that's particularly what happened in this case. I mean, listen, nobody quite knows what's happened, but except that this appears to have been organised according to general admission principles, which are known, satirically as festival seating, which means no seating at all. Which means that when people get in, they swarm towards the front. And there was footage on social media. I don't know if you saw this. People
breaking through the VIP,
being admitted and just tearing through, kind of enjoying the feeling of breaking through turnstiles and so forth.
Yeah.
But you thought that could get out of hand really quickly, and obviously, during this show, it did get out of hand to the extent that. And this is open air, obviously. I think it's 50,000, was 70,000? A lot of people.
Yeah.
To an extent that an ambulance at one stage was driving through the crowd to have to get to the injured, which is horrifying, obviously. And this thing keeps going, and this is. The people are paying $150 for this. Now, I know you shouldn't equate the price with, life and limb and so forth. But, it struck me that if you pay $150 for anything else in life,
you expect some kind of security.
You're kind of looked after, aren't you? You know what I mean? And, and I'm sure they'd have security there and then have police there and so forth. But when you compare it to all the other things in life that you might go to nowadays, you have to say that the kind of the danger involved in those big outdoor music things is greater than the danger you would encounter anywhere else, it seems to me. I don't know anywhere else which would be as dangerous as we've reflected time and time again on these podcasts. If you go to football nowadays, it's not like that at all. You could turn up at football 5 minutes before kickoff and you won't miss anything at all.
No, you'll be more safely.
And you can be out of that place 10 minutes after the final whistle. No trouble at all. Only music gigs, not like that at all, And I just think, if you paid $150
completely,
they have a duty of care to you, don't they? For crying out loud. And I think if there's calls for, as I think there undoubtedly will be, because this is a promoter owned by Live Nation, the big worldwide promoter. And I think there will be calls for kind of congressional inquiries and whatever. And I say that bloody should be. You know what I mean? And I think it's about time this whole racket was dragged into the daylight.
Completely, because what have people learned? Do you remember that terrible incident? Was it 79 with The Who?
With The Who?
Well, which was basically people
40 years ago.
I know. People stampeded to get into the venue because The Who was sound checking late. And they thought that the gig had begun and panicked and ran in and, there was a crush and absolutely appalling. So, you can't believe that things haven't improved massively.
No, and they no doubt have in some respects, but if a thing like this can happen, it's just a terrible, terrible thing. But so I think the more focus on these kind of events, the better, because I think if you go back and read the stories about the 1979 thing in Cincinnati, which we're talking about. And the common complaint at the time was, the promoters are, making too much money and cutting corners and doing this, that, and the other. Well, I think the truth nowadays is that the acts are the people who ought to be in the spotlight over this stuff, because they're the people who are making the money, the major money out of these things. And they like having a load of people. They like having a load of people who are not seated because they're easier to entertain. There's reports that during that show he was encouraging people to rage, as he puts it. I want to see a rage. That just means people swarm into. These people are in this, are responsible for this, and I think some attention needs to be drawn to it. Because I think there's a great tendency to think, the acts can't be to blame for any of this stuff. It's all the suits. It's all the promoters. I don't think it's as simple as that at all. And I couldn't help. I'm going to read you a bit about the New York Times account of Travis Scott. Give a little bit of background.
Yeah.
Since emerging from Houston in the early 2010s, Mr. Scott, New York Times always called.
I know, I love that.
Anybody, and Mr. Lennon.
Referring to a rapper. That's right.
Well, it was just anybody.
Yeah.
Mr. Scott has become one of rap's most ambitious figures, pushing the boundaries of entrepreneurship and of the artist's role as a purveyor of branded products and fan events. That means he's Arthur Daly, effectively. That is, he's out for every cent he can get.
Completely.
Frankly. And, it's a terrible, it's a terrible state of affairs. Terrible state of affairs. And
it is, that's a dismal tale.
The Word Podcast, prime cuts of popular culture served fresh each week.
So Lionel Blair also passed away this week. Lionel Blair, star of stage, screen, and absolutely everything. I can't remember a time without Lionel Blair.
No, I can't.
When he appeared on, he appears in Hard Day's Night, doesn't he?
Yeah,
he's the choreographer.
Yeah, he is.
And the Beatles do this kind of cod tap dance number with him. And it seemed to me that he was already well established by that point. I couldn't remember him emerging.
Well, he started when he was 4, didn't he? How old was he when he died? I'm pretty sure his first performance is when he's 4. That's showbiz, isn't it?
He's in his 90s, wasn't he?
Yeah. And another key thing I discovered was that he shaved 4 years off his age.
Yes.
Didn't admit it until 2016, yes. By which time he kind of got away with it. But that's pretty cool. Just made himself 4 years younger.
And then eventually got an award for the Oldie of the Year, didn't he, or whatever?
He did. It always reminds me of Chrissy Hynde. Chrissy Hynde said that she was very tempted to add 2 or 3 years to her age. Because she said if you add 2 or 3 years to her age, people go, wow, you look brilliant.
So, anyway, of course, the other, he became legend all over again, thanks to I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue. Not always happily, that the Humphrey Lyttelton used to do these.
Oh, he was the running gag, wasn't he?
Yeah, the running gag about that always revolved around how wildly gay Lionel Blair was.
We all thought he was gay, didn't we? Yeah,
which he wasn't. But it was showbiz camp. But this joke kept going for years, and to the extent it really got to Lionel Blair. And when Humphrey Lyttelton died, and Lionel Blair, I saw this quote said, you shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but I'm glad he's dead, or something like that.
Wow.
And then
that harsh.
When Jack D took on the job of hosting I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue after Humphrey Lyttelton died, he resumed the joke. So this thing was just going away again, week after week after week. In one of the
that's the trouble with a long joke.
Isn't popular.
If you keep hammering it, it just keeps getting funnier. Isn't it? It's like the Andrew Neil picture in Private Eye. It's still gets funny.
I suppose that is true. That is true.
Andrew Neil must just wake in the middle of the night and stab a wax effigy of Ian Hislop with knitting needles. You bastard! But no, that's incredible. Don't you think it's interesting that those people, Lionel Blair and Bruce Forsyth, Norman Wisdom, Bob Monkhouse, all those guys, these kind of light entertainment figures used to be kind of just massively, universally mocked, didn't they? Highbrow media always took the piss out of them. And that's kind of changing now.
Oh, it's changed.
Appreciate how incredibly talented those guys are. I was reading a thing about Lionel Blair, and I had a look at this clip that there is of him.
Him and Sammy Davis
dancing tap off with Sammy Davis Jr.
Oh yeah,
World Variety in 1961. It is fantastic. It's absolutely incredible.
Where was I looking at a similar clip the other day of, and I'm sure people can find this on YouTube. Bruce Forsyth and Roy Castle.
Oh, I've seen that. It's amazing, and they play all those instruments, don't they? They play
playing instruments,
drums,
and you're looking at them, you're thinking they're doing that. They are doing that. Yeah. There's no digital jiggery pokery involved with that. Yeah, they're doing that.
Pick up instruments and just tear off a riff, don't they? It's phenomenal.
Xylophone.
There's one with him and Norman Wisdom doing the same thing. Norman Wisdom suddenly stops and there's a drum kit, plays this fantastic solo, and then sings, and it's just breathtakingly talented people.
So here's the conclusion: that if anybody who made it back in those days is more talented than anybody who makes it nowadays. Because people who make it nowadays only do one thing.
They only do one thing. Now, then, because you had to be on variety shows, so you had to have a variety of acts to some extent. You probably had to do a bit of plate spinning and, magic tricks and comedy. That's probably true, isn't it?
It's probably true. Anyway, the other thing that guarantees Lionel Blair immortality is that I do think he's one of the more natural features of rhyming slang.
Rhyming slang.
So Lionel Blair, Flair.
Pete Tong would be the same, wouldn't he?
No, but the thing about people talk about he was wearing a pair of Lionel.
Yeah.
And I always thought there's something very soft and nice about that. The idea that you should lend your name.
Yes.
And also having a name as wonderfully dated as Lionel.
It is.
It attaches
immediately who it is. You know exactly what the surname is and what the rhyme is, precisely.
So there can't be many people still living whose name is rhyming slang, or as you say, Pete Tong, because Eartha Kitt's gone.
I don't know about Ruby Murray or a Charles Shaw Murray, as we used to call
it. Ruby Murray, long dead.
Long dead.
And
Chaz and Dave. Well, there was a Chaz and Dave having a shave, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, that I think.
Brad Pitt.
Chaz is gone. Yeah, well, Brad's still. And Eartha Kitt's dead. Brad Pitt's still with us.
Jeff Hurst.
But shall we see their life
at college? Wasn't it a Jeff Hurst?
Oh, okay. So Jeff Hurst still with us.
If you got one better than a Desmond Tutu, which isn't rhyming slang, it's still quite funny getting a Desmond.
He's still with us. Yes.
Yeah. There was a new one I heard the other day. Was a nice little Anthea Turner. It's a nice little Anthea. That's quite good.
Does that mean Erna?
An Erna, and supposedly Iggy Pop for Cop, which I think is true. The Iggies are after us, and there's certainly Kevin Keegan for a vegan. He's a Kevin Keegan, and another brilliant one I heard, which was Ayrton Senna for a tenor. But another brilliant one I heard, which was going out for Giorgio Armani, Asani, a couple of Giorgios at lunch, and Torville and Deans. Torville and Deans means beans, so what do you have for breakfast? And Torville's on toast. That's good. You think? And there was somebody posted. Somebody posted when you put this on Twitter. Somebody posted a thing about how Mick Jagger was northern for lager, wasn't it? Going out for a Mick. The Sean Ryder is a pint of cider. Uri Geller's
lager.
A pint of lager. A Mick Jagger.
Well, it might work in Scotland, I suppose. It would work in Scotland, wouldn't it? It wouldn't work anywhere else.
And a Dame Edna Everage is a beverage, which I didn't know. And my favourite one, I think, was a Bill Oddie as a vodka. Couple of bills just to kind of give you a bit of Dutch courage. It's good, isn't it? But I agree with you. That's immortality, isn't it? There will always be people wearing Lionel Blairs.
Absolutely. God bless him.
This is a junction in the word podcast. It separates that bit from this next bit.
So here's the Tom Tom Club album, 1981. So that means this is 40 years old.
40 years
this year.
Yeah. I know. That takes you back, doesn't it? Because I remember that record really fondly. I remember thinking that was an absolute, I still do, absolute masterpiece. Wordy Rapping Hood. What a clever song that is. Don't you think? Open
You
from the sound of the
remember, am I
typewriter.
right? Did we run the piece, probably in Smash Hits, about this when it came out?
We did.
Accompanied by a picture of them on a balcony.
That's right.
With Tina wearing a baseball cap.
That's it.
And a really sunny picture, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They've probably taken it. There's Compass Point, wasn't it, where this was done? I think that was part of what it was all
about. You just think how adventurous that record was, and how wonderful it was that things like that got in the charts. The fifth verse of that was in French, wasn't it? Mot pressé, mot sensé, mot qui disons la vérité. You know, and the sound of the typewriter going through it, and just what a word's worth. You know, that chorus and all the little synthesizer riffs in it. It was just incredibly original. I think the bass.
And also, it didn't just have one great hit on this. It had two, didn't it? Because Genius of Love is on here as well. That's right. Which is probably even better.
Yeah.
Because you were wondering if this is the most. Go on.
No, I just thought it's a kind of spin-off group, isn't it? It's a spin-off group. It's not like the groups that people form when they leave a big band. This band was formed by two members of Talking Heads, and Talking Heads, reunited after a while and went back on tour and made more records. So it's a splinter group. It's a spin-off, and I think it's the most successful record ever produced. I mean, I can't think how many other spin-offs there were. The Massive will have to help us. There was the Power Station. Yes. That was a few members of Duran Duran who went off and did something on their own, not terribly spectacularly, but they went back.
Well, it kind of done all right, didn't it?
There was the Creatures, wasn't there, which is Budgie
and
Susie.
Yes, good.
And I can't now remember. Can't think of any more, actually. There must be more.
There will be loads more. There's bound to be loads more. And if people know loads more, they can tell us. And if they know one who were more successful than Tom Tom Club, well, we want to hear it.
We want to hear it.
Huey Green used to say, we want to hear it. But, meanwhile, 40 years ago, the Tom Tom Club. I'm going to play that record later this morning.
It's really good.
So this huge, great slab thing I've got in front of me, God, can't barely lift it off the desk.
Yeah,
is the Paul McCartney The Lyrics book, which is finally now out, and it's a strange beast, Mike. Mike.
All right, Kev.
It's a strange beast. I'm trying to think. I don't own anything else which is two books in a case. You know what I mean? It just. The whole idea of two books just sort of doesn't work. It's not like a double album, is it? You know what I mean?
No.
There's an expectation that when you get to the end of a book, you've finished it. Whereas in this case, because it's two books of his lyrics and it's all arranged alphabetically rather than chronologically. You get to the end of the first one and they pick up the second one.
Which you'd have to do, because if they'd done it chronologically, the second volume might in some cases have been barely leafed through. No disrespect to him, but it's the early stuff that you're really interested in.
Yeah.
But what fascinates me, and I've not seen a copy yet, but what fascinates me, I've read quite a lot about it, I've read a lot of the extracts, I've listened to him on the radio, is that a lot of the time, Paul Muldoon, who's the Irish poet who's edited it and has done the interviews with him and drawn out all this information about the songs, obviously suggests things to him. There's a bit where he suggests that She Loves You is like the hero of L.P. Hartley's novel The Go-Between. And McCartney goes, yeah, absolutely. No, it was, There's a bit where McCartney says that maybe the phrase "let it be" came from Hamlet. I don't know. It's possible. There's a bit where I was hearing on the radio, he's talking about his teacher at school, which is really interesting, actually. His teacher got him interested in Chaucer, got him interested in Shakespeare. And he said, and he also told him about the French symbolist Alfred Jarry, who is the guy who invented the notion of pataphysics, and which is where he got the idea of pataphysical from for Maxwell Silverhammer. You think, did he really? Or did he just know that word and put it in there? I don't know. I mean, after the event, he may be factoring in all sorts of stuff to keep our attention. And good luck to him. He does a really good job.
It's also that there's a kind of technical point here, isn't there? With because we've all done this, where you've interviewed somebody, and you've wanted to reproduce it just in their own words, so that it's not a dialogue. It's not a normal feature. It's in their own words, and at a certain amount of the words that it's reproduced in will be words that have been suggested to them in the course of the interview by you. Because that's the way those things work.
So you're having to,
because the thing you say,
appropriate those words.
I mean, because Mark and I we've done a lot of this. What's the question you use most frequently in any interview? It is, in what way?
Yeah. Give me another example.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah.
Because people talk in nebulous terms. Yeah, I've always felt that he was my best friend. How so? In what way? Give me an example. And so it's in the course of that you construct the good quotes. The good quotes rarely come straight out of somebody's mouth. They're midwifed by the writer. That's how they're turned into good quotes. And it's not, it's not misleading in any way. It's completely honest. And because Muldoon has had to keep his voice out of this book, because it's done in first person fashion by McCartney. And so you can spot a mile.
Yeah, occasionally there are words that you've never imagined McCartney using in daily conversations.
No. But which is not to be snide about Paul McCartney in any way. But it's just the way the book's done. And anyway, my advice to you is the advice I would give to. We were talking to Mark Billingham last week, and he said, should I get my mother to buy this for me for Christmas? And I said, yes, that's certainly what you should do. So it's a brilliant thing to get as a gift. I don't doubt that at all. And I'm sure it'll bring a lot of pleasure to people this Christmas.
The Word Podcast. Fix yourself a drink and it's like being in the pub.
And, of course, the other one that McCartney has been going on about, which is absolutely brilliant, is that the characters from Penny Lane, he says, might or might not have been influenced by Dylan Thomas's Under Milkwood. The idea you've got all these little characters of village life. Is this thinking about things after the event? It might be. And why not? God bless him.
There's also this idea which he is susceptible to. The idea that you kind of appreciate great pop music more by likening it to things that are supposedly legitimate culture.
Absolutely. It gives it depth. It gives it perspective.
It's nonsense, because crying out loud, Penny Lane needs no further justification than what you can hear on that record.
Not remotely. I couldn't agree more. It's just so perfect.
It's the joy and strangeness of that record. It's in the it's in the record. It's not in the song.
Yeah.
It's in the record.
It's the record. And it's the
way he did it.
It's a play, isn't it? The three verses, the banker, the barber, the farmer, and they all meet in the last verse. And the other amazing thing is that simultaneously, it's the blue suburban skies and the pouring rain. So it's a fantastic kind of dream sequence. God, it's brilliant. You're right. It doesn't need any more.
Absolutely everything. It doesn't need you to say, do you know what makes it really good? It's a bit like Dylan Thomas. I'll give over. That's the kind of thing your English teacher. That's the kind of thing your English teacher would say.
Exactly.
That's what people say who don't love and appreciate pop music. You know what I mean? They're coming from somewhere else altogether. Dylan Thomas should be bloody flattered he was ever mentioned in the same breath as Paul McCartney's Penny Lane. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Rather than the other way around. But anyway,
true.
I'm sorry, you've got me off on one.
No, I agree with you.
It's my favourite subject, Nobel Prizes and all that nonsense. It's pop music. It lives within us. It needs no greater justification than that. You know what I mean? Doesn't need awards, doesn't need medals, anything. We've got it inside us in a way that we don't have other arts at all. Anyway, questions from the Massive.
What have the Massive come up with?
All sorts of things. Richard Button says, after watching Viv Groskopf on Word in Your Attic and pondering music played at weddings, why do wedding DJs always play Come On Eileen, because it's difficult to dance to. And he even stops in the middle. Good points. Why? And it's not an obvious thing to dance to at all.
Oh, right.
I suppose it's a kind of folky sing-song, isn't it? Everybody knows it. Everybody in the room knows it.
Everyone knows it. It's got an identifiable chorus. It's got a fiddle on it, which makes it kind of multi-generational, doesn't it?
That's
a little bit, everybody. Oh, a fiddle. It's kind of Irish music. It's not kind of bracing pop music we normally get. Yeah,
no, that's true. But
the great tracks. Let's Twist Again for weddings. Yeah, Crazy in Love. I'll tell you another classic, The Love Cats by The Cure.
Oh, right.
Works. Okay. Hey Ya by Outkast. The Locomotion is a monster. Sweet Caroline, Love Shack. That's what I'm offering. All of those are good. They work.
Very good.
Yeah.
Bobby Seals wants to know, do you ever regularly skip a track on an album, even if it's a supposedly outstanding track on a genuinely great album? Just because you've heard it so many times before. He says when he listens to Led Zeppelin 4, he will skip Stairway to Heaven. Yes, I've done that many, many times. There's many times I might want to listen to Led Zeppelin 4, but the minute Stairway to Heaven comes on, that's enough. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Because you just said it.
Too long.
Absolutely. Too long, too familiar.
Way too long.
Familiar and short you can put up with, but familiar and long, yes, that's the deadly combination. Somebody wants to know if you picked up a copy of the UK Rolling Stone magazine. I didn't realise it was out. So no, I haven't. I don't think you have, Mark. Have you?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay. James Wilkinson says, "Why are people, mainly blokes, so keen to tell you how they get Trap Mask Replica? I contend that nobody does, but
that's
lots
good.
Like to claim they do.
Oh,
and is there any female on record as appreciating it?" I'll tell you my journey with Trap Mask Replica, James. I am not afraid to confess that I first got into it at the age of 19, 20 or whatever, because I thought this is the kind of thing I ought to be into. And I used to love the way John Peel used to talk about the Good Captain and his Magic Band. I thought the idea of a group called Captain Beefheart the Magic Band, that's just so kind of out there. And I thought, I want a piece of this. And I heard it, and I've only ever been able to take it in really small doses. The doses being Moonlight on Vermont.
Moonlight on Vermont. Ella Garou, The Dust Blows Forward, The Dust Blows Back. Those
and
are the big tracks.
I was always very keen on the chat in between tracks where you can hear him talking to people and, all that sort of stuff. But have I ever, would I ever sat down and listened to it? No.
We did a podcast, a birthday pod the other day, didn't we? With a lovely guy who was talking about how sometimes the idea of music is better than the music itself. And that's a really good example. I mean, I do feel that I did get it. I listened to it for ages, desperately trying to, because as you say, it was so fashionable and everybody thought, this is the right, you either got this thing or you didn't, and it made you a different kind of person if you're on the inside, And I eventually did. I kind of understood what the noise was that he was trying to create. And the more that I read about it, the more I discovered that he couldn't really play an instrument and he'd sung the parts to the band. The more fascinating it became. It became like a kind of huge art statement. But would you go? I like the idea of it far better than I like listening to it. I've thought about Trap Mask Replica and looked at those pictures. I thought about the personnel, the winged eel fingering, mascara snake. I've thought about that lineup, the magical combination of people, far more than I put that record down. I've got it upstairs. I would no more go out and get it this afternoon and stick it on than fly to the moon.
And also, second point, which brings me to James' second point, you would only play it if your good lady wife was out the house with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
God's sake, what is that racket? Who's torturing a cat? So, I know where you're coming from, James. Phil Turner, actually, back to the subject of McCartney. He did this thing from the festival hall on Friday night. which was streamed. And another word and erratic guest, Samira Ahmed, says, did a very good job as host. Let the conversation flow. But plenty have moaned about chat being too Beatles-centric. Is interviewing him a thankless task now? Well, I don't think he's ever a thankless task because he's a terrific interview. He's always got something to say.
Yeah, he's really funny.
But in the case of that chat, I didn't see it myself, but if you're doing a thing with Paul McCartney and it's going to be streamed, presumably worldwide or whatever, it's going to have a big audience. The last thing you want to do is to encourage him to get into, can you tell us more about the B-side of kind of a track from Chaos and Creation in the Backyard or whatever? You're going to want to.
You're going to lose 99% of the audience. You've got to concentrate on the big stuff that everyone's involved with.
That everybody's involved with. Everybody has a way into. And so, if you're interviewing somebody like that, and particularly if you're doing it on telly or you're doing it for broadcast or radio or anything, when they naturally get onto a subject which is really familiar to a load of people, you just thank God inside, don't you?
Yeah.
You just think, relax, it's going to be fine. Because you can feel the attention in the room just rising as soon as he does that. And then not him, just anybody. And the minute they get into something obscure or they go off on a tangent, you can just feel the room going away from it, So I'm not surprised if she encouraged him to, to stay on those subjects.
And also, he either comes up with something vaguely new or will give you something he may have told someone before, but with such enthusiasm and such vigor and verve that you kind of feel you're hearing it for the first time. And he's very, very charismatic and incredibly funny. And also, what a good choice of interviewer. Great choice.
He also understands he's Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
And so
he's got your attention already.
He's got your attention because he's Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
So if he talks about doing ordinary things, which he very often does, he knows that that's interesting because he's Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of not what you'd expect. Well, why shouldn't you expect it? He plays with that idea. Jason Brooks says, when was the last time you popped into HMV and what did you buy? I haven't popped into HMV in a while. I went into a shop yesterday, a record shop yesterday, and went looking for an Ornette Coleman record, which Brent Hansen had played us a bit of last week.
Oh yeah,
and couldn't find it. So
which record shop did you go to?
I went. There's a little jazz outlet in Foyles in Charing Cross Road. It's on the first floor, second floor.
Brilliant.
And it's a really good little jazz shop. Just happens to be within Foyles. And I couldn't find this record. I should have asked, but I just he was dealing with somebody else, so I didn't bother. That's my disappointing answer to your question, Jason. Carl Adlam says Judas Priest have released a 42-disc box set.
Oh, yes, I saw that, yeah. That's his question was, are there any bands that you listen to 42 discs of? That's a really good question.
No.
There aren't.
There aren't
none.
Not 42.
Because your level of invention has got to be absolutely staggering. You've got to be a kind of a Steely Dan, haven't you?
And also they Steely Dan, hadn't made 42 discs. Now I'm trying to think. I listen to a lot of Miles Davis, but 42 discs, I'm not so sure.
No,
a dozen, and probably, because you can find a dozen Miles Davis records which are exceptionally good, but not 42. 42.
You don't need to be listening to that because you're so obsessed. You want to hear the minute differences on this take compared to another take. It's that kind of, it's the Grateful Dead kind of syndrome, isn't it? But no, 42 is ridiculous.
Paul Harrison says, I've subscribed to the Dylan vinyl series. What is this, Mark? I don't know about this. This is the whole lot. I'm trying to make myself a fan. Am I mad? Taking your latter question first, yes. Don't try and make yourself a fan of anybody. It's just no point at all. You know what I mean?
Surely it either connects with you or it doesn't.
Just.
Although, are we contradicting what we've just said about Captain Beefheart and Trap Mask Replica?
No, the joy about Trammaster Replica is very often not to do with playing it. It's just to do with kind of knowing about it, and finding it stimulating and amusing. But the idea of somebody trying to like Bob Dylan, it's not going to work. You know, you're right, because here's what I'd say. You either like the way he sings or you don't. And if you don't like the way he sings, nothing else he does is going to compensate. No. It's not going to get you around that.
It's going to be a massive obstacle, which you're never going to get over.
Because in the end, it's his musical personality in all its different forms, and boy, it's varied over the years. That's the winning thing, isn't it, really? That's the thing you form a relationship with. And so you're not going to get round that at all. Also, he said somebody else actually, Hazy Cloud Song says, and John Flaherty talking about the resumption of the never-ending tour, what do we think? Because you've got a set list, haven't you, Mark? Of
I have somewhere. I'm just trying to see if I can find it. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. Basically, Dylan played. Dylan played 18 songs. This was his first show, I think. It was in Milwaukee, first show for 2 years. Played 18 songs. It's really interesting that 3 songs of that on that set list were from the 60s and 1 from the 70s, and everything else was more modern.
Can I guess?
So, right. See, I've got it here. See if you can guess the 60s ones.
Oh, God.
Only 3.
Did he do Mr. Tambourine Man?
No.
Okay. All right. I give up.
No, it's most likely you go your way and I'll go mine, which was 1966. I'll Be Your Baby Tonight. And it takes a lot to laugh. It takes a train to cry.
No.
So that was really interesting. That and the 70s would have been Watching the River Flow.
Okay.
And maybe Simple Twist of Fate, actually.
Okay. All right.
Yes. Sorry, there's 2 there. But that's quite interesting that he's not that reliant on that early catalogue. The Stones, however, played the other night. Played 19 songs, 12 of those from the 1960s, and 3 from the 70s.
I want to guess this. 12 Rolling Stones songs from the 1960s
played the other night.
That they still play in the 2020s.
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking about this. Satisfaction. They've got to have done Satisfaction. Yes?
Let's have a quick look. Yes, they do.
Sure.
Yes, Satisfaction. Yes.
Okay. Jumpy Jack Flash.
Yep.
Jumpy Jack Flash. Honky Tonk Women.
Yep.
Gimme Shelter.
Yes.
Somebody from Let It Bleed. They probably don't play Midnight Rambler anymore, do they?
They don't do Midnight Rambler. They don't do Brown Sugar. I'll tell you what.
Brown Sugar's in the 70s anyway. Sympathy for the Devil.
Yep.
Okay.
You can't always get what you want. They did. They did. Honky Tonk Women, yes. Midnight Rambler. Painted Black.
Oh, they did Midnight Rambler.
They did do Midnight Rambler. Sorry, they did.
They've dropped Brown Sugar because it's not politically correct, but they've kept Midnight Rambler.
I know they did.
Which is about a murder. Oh, good God. So what's right? And then
Painted Black.
How many more recent ones? Go on. What are the recent ones?
I'm trying to think what the recent ones are. They did Rocks Off. 19th Nervous Breakdown they did too. They did Rocks Off.
All right.
Tumbling Dice. Start Me Up. Connection. Slipping Away. Keith Richards on lead vocals.
Connections between the buns.
Keith. Miss You. And I think that's about it. But it's interesting, isn't it, that Dylan is not nearly as reliant on that very early catalogue. What a great position he's in. But also, it has to be said that a lot of people don't really want to hear him play those early songs because they're kind of unrecognizable.
But where was Bob Dylan playing? Presumably some bowling alley in Milwaukee or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some Legion Hall in Moose Droppings, Ohio. Where were the Rolling Stones playing? Some enormo dome in front of 50,000 people. It's a different audience, isn't it, really?
It is.
So you see why both doing it. John Crane wants to know if we've got any thoughts on doing a recommendation list of books, films, podcasts of the year.
Oh, my Lord.
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment. God. How many films have we seen? I mean, I've been to the cinema once. Christ. I tell you, the book I would recommend, John Cooper Clarke's I want to be yours, which is fantastic. I think it actually came out in hardback last year. That is simply one of the greatest biogs I have ever read. It's fantastic.
No, it's very good. Very good. So put that on your Christmas list. And if you're looking for a gift to buy for yourself this Christmas, you could consider being a Patreon supporter.
Oh, that was effortless.
It brings you enormous pleasure and us a little bit of pleasure as well. And, because, we do an awful lot of this for love, undoubtedly, but a little bit of cash helps the love go down well, doesn't it? Occasionally.
Keeps the wheels oiled.
You could consider joining those group of the elect, the favored supporters who are actually expressing their cash in monetary, their affection in monetary terms, and also have joined us, to be our guests, birthday guests on Word in Your Attic, and sometimes on the podcast. So if you want to be among that group, where do you go and look? You go and look on patreon.com/wordinyour ear for further details.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.